This is a story about a 9-year-old Korean-American girl named Hana Park who became the forgotten witness in a high-stakes criminal trial. In a world obsessed with data and digital proof, her fragile memory was dismissed until the truth she carried shook an entire courtroom. This is a story about courage and visibility, and what happens when a child's voice dares to disrupt a system built to ignore her. I saw him leave before the man got hurt. He didn't do it. Hana's voice barely rose above a whisper, but the courtroom didn't even flinch. They didn't hear her. Or worse, they chose not to. It was the biggest trial in Jefferson County in years. A packed courtroom, reporters on every bench, microphones hanging over the gallery like steel vultures. The accused, Dominic Reyes, a former youth counselor turned tech assistant at a local school, now charged with attempted murder of an influential banker, found unconscious in an abandoned parking lot. The evidence looked airtight: phone records, bank withdrawals, a hoodie caught on camera. But none of it felt real to Hana. Because she had been there. She had seen him walk away. But no one cared what a 9-year-old remembered. Her father, Mr. Park, didn't know she was there that day. He worked double shifts at the plant welding steel to send Hana to better schools. He thought she was in class like every other Monday. Instead, she skipped the bus, wrapped her snack in a napkin, and walked 4 miles in last season's sneakers just to sit in the last row of the courthouse. She didn't bring a sign. She didn't shout. She just listened. 2 weeks before Dominic Reyes had stepped between her and a group of older boys in Greenview Park. They had called her Virus Girl and tried to take her sketchbook. Dominic didn't yell or threaten. He simply said, "That's not how we treat people here." And they backed off. No one had ever done that for her. So when the news said Dominic had hurt someone badly and now might never see daylight again, Hana felt something inside her clench. Not because she owed him, but because she knew what it was like to be punished just for existing. She showed up in court, tiny and silent. No one asked who she was. No one noticed when she clutched the rail-wide eyes fixed on the defense table. No one saw the paper in her sleeve, the one where she had drawn the alley, the lights, the bench, and the man in the red hat who really stayed behind. She didn't know his name, but she knew he wasn't Dominic. The prosecutor clicked through photos on screen, voice smooth, confident. Dominic Reyes withdrew $4,200 in cash hours before the assault. He was in the area. His phone pinged off Tower 19, 3 blocks from the scene, and the victim had previously filed a complaint about stolen funds from a school donation drive, funds Mr. Reyes managed. It was logical. It was polished. But Hana saw something else: the unspoken. The deep belief that people like Dominic, Latino, working class, barely making rent, were guilty first and human second. That memory didn't matter when there were spreadsheets. She stood up once, whispered, "He didn't do it." No one turned. She sat back down. Her legs didn't quite reach the floor. An hour later, the defense lawyer asked for a recess. She looked exhausted, like someone swimming upstream against a river of disbelief. No witnesses had come forward. Dominic had refused to testify, and everyone thought that meant guilt. The lawyer packed her papers in slow, heavy movements. Hana's chest tightened. She wanted to scream. She didn't. She waited until the break, followed the crowd out, then quietly approached a young man with a laptop and a visitor badge. He looked barely older than her cousins. She tapped his sleeve. "Do you work here?" He blinked. "Kind of. I'm an intern." "Then listen," she said. And she told him everything. His name was Marco Alvarez, a second-year law student doing clerical work for the defense. No one listened to him either, so when Hana spoke, he didn't laugh. He listened. Really listened. "Where were you standing?" he asked. "Near the bench by the alley wall." "I drew it." She pulled out her folded sketch. The lines were shaky but clear. It showed a red hooded man slouched on the trash bin, watching Dominic walk away in the opposite direction. The timestamp from Hana's memory, 4:12 p.m. The police claimed the assault happened at 4:15. It wasn't evidence, not in the eyes of a court. but Marco saw what it was a start. Back inside, the defense resumed without spark. Dominic sat still, his hands clasped, like he was trying not to disappear. His lawyer repeated the same arguments this time, flat or tired. The judge adjusted his glasses. The jury stared like statues. Hana wanted to scream again, but the court moved on. The system moved on. That night, Marco snuck copies of the case files back to his dorm. He opened tabs until the screen glowed like a city. Something about the victim's financial records didn't sit right. The bank statements leaked to the press showed recent payments to a shell company in Nevada. That shell was linked to a real estate development whose lawyer had once defended Tower Tech Inc., the same telecom firm that owned Tower 19. Data. Always data. But who controlled it? Marco's heart pounded. If the ping data came from Tower Tech, and the victim had financial ties to Tower Tech, then any tampering would look like truth, especially in court. He dug deeper. Meanwhile, Hana sat in her room, lights off, the sketchbook open on her lap. She flipped to the page again. Red hood, broken bench. The way the man lit a cigarette and dropped something, maybe a phone. She remembered the sound. She began to cry, not because she was afraid, but because it felt like nobody wanted to believe a kid anymore. Maybe they never had. But she had told Marco, and Marco wasn't done. And tomorrow, he planned to do something no intern had ever dared. Speak directly to the court. Whether they listened, that was a different story. I need 5 minutes with the judge, Marco told the defense attorney the next morning, his voice shaking but resolute. She blinked at him like he'd lost his mind. You're an intern. So was Aaron Brockovich, he replied. And then he slipped the folded sketch from Hana into her hand. She saw what nobody else did. The attorney hesitated, but something in his eyes, urgency, maybe hope, made her nod. You've got to. That's how it began. Marco stood in Judge Kessler's chambers, facing a wall lined with law books older than his parents. The judge glanced down at the sketch, like it was a napkin doodle from a diner. Mr. Alvarez, this isn't evidence. I know, Your Honor. But the girl who drew it was there. She says Reyes wasn't. She's 9. She's also the only one who doesn't have something to gain from lying. That line made the judge pause. Back in the courtroom, Hana sat alone again. Same seat, same silence. Her fingers traced the edge of the wooden bench like it was braille. She didn't know what Marco was doing. She only knew she couldn't go back to class until someone looked at the truth. The court reconvened. The air felt heavier. Marco wasn't seated in the gallery anymore. He stood beside the defense team, whispering something to the lead attorney. The judge entered. A hush fell. Ms. Daniels, he said to the defense. You have something for the court. Daniels cleared her throat, then held up the sketch. This was handed to me this morning. It's not an official exhibit, but it comes from a direct eyewitness who was present at the scene and who has no affiliation with the defendant. Gasps rippled through the room. The prosecutor stood. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. We cannot admit children's drawings as factual evidence. The judge nodded. True. But we can verify their context. And perhaps, he added, peering over his glasses, we should. So began the unofficial hearing. A side session. A break in the script. They called Hana. She walked up slowly, her backpack too big for her frame, her shoelaces untied. The court officer adjusted the mic. State your name, please. Hana Park. Do you know what truth means? Yes. Do you promise to tell it? She nodded. What did you see that day? The attorney asked. Hana's voice was soft but clear. Mr. Reyes left the park around 4 o'clock. He helped me with something. Then he walked that way. She pointed to the left of the courtroom, mimicking the real path. There was another man sitting near the alley. He had a red hood. Did he follow Mr. Reyes? No, she said firmly. He stayed. I saw him light a cigarette. And then I left. Why didn't you come forward sooner? No one asked. The court didn't laugh. They didn't blink. Because deep down, they knew she was right. Marco leaned forward. Your Honor, if I may. The judge, against every rule of protocol, gestured. Go on. Marco tapped on a tablet he'd brought. Last night, I pulled data from Tower 19's back-end metadata. It was an open portal, unsecured. The log entries for that afternoon, they were altered. He looked around. The phone ping that supposedly placed Reyes at the scene, it was inserted 37 minutes after the incident. Now the courtroom buzzed like a beehive cracked open. The prosecutor stammered. How can we verify this? This is inadmissible. We will verify it. The judge snapped. Immediately. He called a recess. 30 minutes turned into 90. Tech analysts were summoned. Emails subpoenaed. Suddenly, the case no longer looked airtight. It looked fabricated. Hana sat in the hallway, sipping orange juice from a vending machine. She didn't smile. Not yet. Do you think they'll believe it? She asked Marco, who sat beside her. He sighed. They'll believe data. That's the irony. But not me. You started it, he said. Without your memory, no one would have looked. Inside the judge's chambers, something else unfolded. One of the courthouse IT staff under questioning admitted that Tower Tech had installed the server linked to the tower system on contract with the victim's bank, the same bank whose accounts Reyes was accused of stealing from. It was a web, and someone had tried to stitch Dominic Reyes into the center. When court resumed, the judge's tone had changed. We are currently launching a full inquiry into the data trail used to indict Mr. Reyes. In the meantime, he will be released under protective custody. The courtroom exploded. Reporters jumped up. Phones buzzed. Hana blinked. Is that good? She asked. Marco smiled for the first time. It's not justice, but it's something. As the bailiffs removed Reyes's handcuffs, he turned to look at Hana. Their eyes met. He didn't cry. He just gave the smallest nod, like he knew. She looked back, still small, resolute. But outside the courthouse, a man in a navy coat tapped his earpiece. We have a problem, he said. The girl just blew the floor out. On the other end, someone hissed, then fix it before she digs deeper. Because what Hana didn't know was that the red-hooded man wasn't just a stranger. And what he dropped in that alley, the thing she thought was a phone, was something much more dangerous. Something that, if found, could unravel everything. The thing he dropped wasn't a phone, not even close. But Hana wouldn't find that out until much later. For now, she only remembered the way it hit the ground, heavy, not plastic, and the strange flash of silver before it disappeared in the leaves. A grown-up might have called it a data key. Hana just called it the shiny thing, and someone else had remembered it too. That night, as the evening news blared in the Park family's one-bedroom apartment, Hana sat cross-legged on the floor, sketchbook open, pencil in hand. Every channel ran her courtroom moment on repeat. Little girl disrupts trial with doodle of justice. Her father, exhausted and baffled, just kept muttering, Hana, how did you even get into court? She didn't answer. She didn't know how to explain what it felt like to know something and be ignored. Instead, she turned to a new page and drew the alley again. But this time, she drew the shiny object. It wasn't just part of the scene anymore. It was centered. 3 blocks away, in a private office atop a co-working space disguised as a startup, 2 men huddled over surveillance footage. Zoom in. There. That blur in the leaves. One of them pointed. The other nodded grimly. If the girl remembers that thing. She already has, the first one said. Her drawing shows it. She's not just a witness. She's a loose thread. The object was a secure crypto dongle, an encrypted key that stored off-grid data. And what was inside? Tied back to both Tower Tech and a politician named Senator Klein. Emails, shell payments, fabricated evidence protocols used in multiple trials across the state. It was meant to vanish, not to be seen, and certainly not to be drawn by a child in front of 30 million live-streaming viewers. Back in Hana's room, something tugged at her memory. The shiny thing wasn't just a blur anymore. It had a shape. Cylindrical, rounded edges. She pressed her pencil harder. Click, click. "Stop pressing so hard, baby," her father called from the kitchen. She didn't respond. Her hands moved faster. This wasn't about art anymore. It was about proof. Meanwhile, Marco sat alone in the law library, flipping through case after case digitally and in paper. The Reyes case wasn't the first with TowerTech metadata. In fact, there were 6 others, all involving people of color, all lacking eyewitnesses, all decided based on digital tower logs that nobody had verified independently. A pattern was forming, and patterns meant motive. He grabbed his phone and texted Daniels, the lead defense attorney. "We need to look at prior TowerTech cases. This isn't isolated." Her reply came seconds later. "Agreed, but be careful. This thing's bigger than we thought." And it was. Because while Marco traced patterns, Hana slipped out the next morning without telling anyone. The alley wasn't far, and she had to see it again. She walked past the yellow tape, past the corner store, past the graffiti where someone had scrawled, "Justice for Reyes." The morning air was cold, and her jacket wasn't enough, but she didn't care. She retraced every step in her sketch. The bench, the trash bin, the concrete split near the curb. And then she saw it. Half hidden under dry leaves was the thing she'd drawn a dozen times. Not a toy, not a phone. She picked it up with trembling fingers. It was heavier than she expected. Cold. Metal. There was a small sticker on the side, DR37, TT secured. She stared. Something buzzed in her chest. She turned to leave and froze. A man stood at the mouth of the alley. Navy coat. Hat too low for his eyes to show. Hana's heart pounded. He didn't move. He just stood watching. She ran. He didn't chase. Not yet. Hana burst into the courthouse, breathless hair tangled the object clutched tight in her palm. Marco, already inside for a hearing, rushed to her side. "Where were you?" "I found it," she said. "The shiny thing." He stared at her hand, and his stomach dropped. 2 hours later, they were in the judge's private chamber again. This time with an FBI agent from cybercrime present. Marco connected the dongle to a secure terminal. The screen flashed to life. Files, logs, names. A list of 27 altered metadata reports, each linked to a trial where digital tower logs had sealed the verdict. The Reyes case was only the latest. The agent's face went pale. Where did this come from? Marco looked at Hana. She looked at the judge. "From the leaves," she whispered. "Where truth goes when nobody wants to find it." But the truth didn't just sit quietly. As word of the dongle leaked first through whispers in the courthouse, then onto a whistleblower forum, the pressure boiled over. A national law firm announced it was opening a review of dozens of convictions. The governor's office issued a vague statement. TowerTech stocks began to tumble. And somewhere a senator's advisor made a call to a burner phone and said, "We need to make sure that girl forgets." Because now, they weren't just worried about Dominic Reyes going free. They were worried about the floodgate she'd just opened, and about a 9-year-old girl who didn't know when to stop asking the wrong questions. "You really think I'm gonna just forget?" Hana asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as she stared out the window of the courthouse holding room. Marco turned away from the screen, flashing encrypted file names, and looked at her. "Honestly, no," he said. "That's what scares them." The drive back to Hana's apartment was silent. Joyce, her aunt summoned in a panic after news of Hana sneaking off to the alley, sat in the front seat, arms crossed, jaw clenched. She didn't speak until they pulled into the lot. Inside. Now. Her voice was a cold wall. In the apartment, the lights flickered once before settling. Hana placed the metal dongle on the kitchen table, like it was a loaded weapon. Joyce glanced at it, then back at her niece. "You don't go sneaking off to alleys with this kind of storm brewing," she hissed. "You're 9. 9, Hana." Hana didn't argue. She just pointed to the TV. A breaking news banner rolled across the screen. DOJ opens preliminary inquiry into digital evidence fraud in Missouri case. Next to it, a blurry photo of her face taken from the courtroom livestream. The caption, "The girl who drew the truth." Joyce sat down. Lord help us all. What none of them saw, however, was the second story, buried under the ticker feed. Senator Klein declines to comment on alleged ties to Tower Tech's evidence infrastructure. That night, Hana couldn't sleep. Every shadow against the blinds felt like eyes watching. Every floorboard creak sounded like someone testing the lock. The object, now wrapped in a dish towel and hidden in her sock drawer, seemed to hum with something alive. She couldn't explain it. She just knew it wasn't over. Elsewhere in the city, a man sat inside a parked car engine off windows cracked. He watched the apartment building for hours. He wasn't there to hurt anyone. Not yet. His job was simpler: to listen, to wait, and if needed, to retrieve the dongle. Across town, Marco couldn't sleep either. He had printed out 3 files from the drive, carefully redacted, encrypted in triple layers, and slid them into a sealed envelope. One file was marked Case ID 14783A, Reyes D. Another was a list of tower ping adjustments, approved manually by someone named C. Klein. The third was more chilling, a case involving a teenager named Malik Henderson, convicted on similar metadata. The connection, the same altered tower pattern. But Malik hadn't lived to appeal. He had died in custody, 17 years old. The weight in Marco's chest grew heavier. At dawn, he met with Attorney Daniels outside a coffee shop. She arrived in sunglasses and a ball cap, her voice sharp. "You know they're watching you, right?" He nodded. "That's why we don't stop." She flipped through the envelope and went still. "This is enough to trigger a federal investigation." "But it needs a face," Marco said. "Not just mine. Hers." Daniels hesitated. "You're suggesting we let a child stand at the center of a political hurricane? I'm saying she already is." That afternoon, Hana was pulled from school. An official-looking woman with kind eyes and a government badge showed up at the classroom door. Joyce had approved the meeting, but only after a long, whispered phone call with Daniels. The woman introduced herself as Agent Weller from the DOJ's Civil Rights Division. She knelt down to Hana's height and asked, "Do you remember everything you saw?" Hana nodded. "I drew it. Would you be willing to talk to us about it?" "In a safe room with your aunt there?" Hana paused, then asked one question. "Will it stop them from lying again?" Weller blinked, stunned by the bluntness. "We're trying." Inside the federal interview room, Hana sat between Joyce and Agent Weller. She opened her sketchbook and slowly walked through everything, pointing to each page, explaining timelines, sounds, shapes, even smells. Weller took notes, but said little. At the end, she leaned forward. "You're very brave." "I'm not brave," Hana replied. "I'm just the only one who saw what nobody wanted to see." Weller left the room with a copy of the drawing. Outside, she made a call. "We're moving forward." But the senator won't go quietly. That same night, as Joyce made dinner and Hana reread her notes for the 5th time, the front door buzzer rang. Joyce glanced at the clock. 8:47 p.m. Too late for visitors. She moved to the intercom. "Yes," a voice crackled back. "Package for Ms. Park." "I didn't order anything," she said. Silence. She peeked through the peephole. No one there. Marco's phone buzzed seconds later. Unknown number. "She's being watched. If you want her safe, make her stop." No signature. No trace. He texted back anyway. "She's not the one who should be afraid." But fear was coming. Not in threats, but in the form of twisted truths, smeared stories, and the machinery of power. Because the closer Hana and Marco got to the root, the more they pulled back the digital curtain, the more dangerous the reality became. And tomorrow, someone wasn't going to wait in the shadows anymore. They were going to try and silence the girl with the sketchbook. But they were about to find out. She remembered more than they realized. The man didn't come with a gun. He came with a microphone. At 9:12 a.m., the next morning, Hana opened her apartment door to find a news van parked curbside and a man in a blazer crouched in front of the peephole. He smiled too wide, too fast. "Hana Park?" he asked, adjusting the wire in his ear. Mind if we ask you a few questions? Off the record, of course. Behind him stood a cameraman already rolling. Joyce rushed to the door and pulled Hana back inside, slamming the deadbolt. "We said no cameras," she shouted through the crack. "She's a child." The reporter's smile never dropped. The public deserves to know who's influencing federal justice. That line spread like a cold wind across the apartment floor. 10 minutes later, news stations were flashing headlines: "Sketchbook Girl" or "Political Pawn and Child Witness at Center of DOJ Storm Manipulated" or "Maverick." It had begun. They didn't need to silence Hana with violence. They just needed to change the story, twist it, frame her as unstable, emotional, coached, and slowly, brick by brick, the truth would dissolve. Marco stormed into Daniel's office waving a screenshot. "They're painting her like she's making it up." Daniel stayed calm, tapping her pen. "Of course they are. The system always fights back hardest when it's cornered by someone it never saw coming." "She's not safe." His voice cracked. "They're calling her a symbol, then trying to bury her under that label." Daniel stood and crossed to the window. "Then we stopped playing defense." That night, a clip surfaced online. A grainy video of Hana outside the alley 2 days earlier. The footage had no sound, just a long lens angle of a small girl picking something up from the ground. It was edited to look like she planted the dongle. The comments were brutal. This was staged. Where did she get it? 9-year-old prodigy, or political puppet. Marco saw it before Hana did. But not fast enough. When Hana finally scrolled past the video on her tablet, her hands froze. "They think I faked it." Her voice was hollow. Joyce took the device and turned it face down. People believe what makes them feel safest. And the truth doesn't make anyone feel safe right now. Marco arrived 20 minutes later, out of breath, holding a thick file. "We're flipping the script," he said. "You're going to speak. On your terms." Daniels had arranged for a televised statement, not through the networks, but on a neutral livestream channel hosted by the Civil Rights Bar Association. It wouldn't be polished. It wouldn't be viral. But it would be real. Hana sat in front of a camera the next day, wearing a blue hoodie and jeans. No stage, no script, just her and the mic. "I didn't fake anything." She began, her voice small but clear. "I don't even know how to lie that big." She looked straight into the camera. "I went to court because I saw something nobody else did. I remembered because it mattered. I picked something up from the ground because I thought it was important. I don't care about politics. I care about the truth." She paused, then said the line that would be clipped and shared 1,000 times that night. "If I'm wrong, then prove it. But don't erase me just because I'm inconvenient." The statement ran 15 minutes. No flashy music, no edits. Just raw testimony from a girl who refused to disappear. By the next morning, something unexpected happened. A wave of support rolled in, not from politicians, but from teachers, librarians, courtroom sketch artists, even data analysts. People who knew the power of remembering. People who had also been dismissed for knowing too much, too young. Hashtags flipped. Sketchbook, truth replaced, Jasher child pawn. And then came the twist. An anonymous whistleblower verified through encrypted upload released a cache of internal Tower Tech communications. Among them, an email string between executives discussing the Reyes case. One subject line stood out: "We can use the same Tower protocol. The metadata trail worked last time. The implications were explosive." Daniels filed a motion for a formal inquiry into not just the Reyes conviction, but every case in Missouri that had used the Tower Tech system without independent validation. The court accepted. But the most damning piece came in a single file, a time-stamped log, showing a manual override on Reyes's data entry. The override user ID Klein Auth 7. Marco stared at the screen. "That's it." Daniels nodded. "That's more than it. That's federal fraud." News outlets scrambled to update their stories. The spin no longer worked. Hana wasn't a symbol. She wasn't a pawn. She was a witness. The witness. And now, she was dangerous. Across the state, Senator Klein canceled 3 public appearances. Tower Tech issued a preemptive internal audit. But even as the system wobbled, another plan was already in motion this time, to turn public sympathy against the case in subtler ways. Whisper campaigns, leaked disciplinary notes from Hana's school, accusations that Marco had coached her for attention. But there was one thing none of them expected. Hana remembered everything, including one detail from the alley that still hadn't made the news. A symbol scratched into the side of the trash bin, one she had drawn in her sketchbook without knowing what it meant. But Marco did. It was a glyph from a military encryption registry used only in covert cyber operations. And it didn't belong in any alley in Missouri, which meant this wasn't just corporate sabotage. It was something darker, and someone had gone to great lengths to hide it in plain sight. "What you saw," Marco said, slowly flipping Hana's sketchbook to the page with the strange symbol etched beside the alley trash bin, "isn't graffiti." He traced the mark with his fingertip. "It's a ghost tag. Black Ops encryption signature. Military grade. It shouldn't be there. But it is." Hana leaned over his shoulder, brow furrowed. "What does it mean?" Marco didn't answer right away. He was already texting a contact, an old roommate turned NSA contractor who owed him more than one favor. His fingers flew across the screen. "Need ID on this mark. Possible link to op-level encryption. Missouri." Seconds ticked by. Then the reply came. "You're kidding me. That symbol's not public. Used on secure data caching hardware." "Who drew this?" Marco hesitated. Then typed a 9-year-old. And she wasn't supposed to see it. Meanwhile, across town, Daniel stood in front of the Missouri State Integrity Commission with a folder full of signed statements, file hashes, and chain of custody documents. Behind her sat Reyes, finally in a clean shirt, his expression dazed but resolute. Today was the hearing to vacate his charges. Daniels delivered her summary in under 10 minutes. Evidence of metadata tampering confirmed. Motive established via Tower Tech internal emails. Additional pattern of judicial misconduct under investigation. And finally, a witness dismissed due to age who turned out to be the only one telling the truth. Reyes didn't speak. He didn't need to. When the commission broke for review, one board member muttered, "We should have listened to the girl sooner." But listening wasn't enough anymore. Back at Hana's apartment, Joyce opened the door to find 2 unfamiliar men in pressed shirts and polite smiles. They introduced themselves as representatives from a private security firm supporting digital infrastructure protection. It sounded official. It sounded vague. "We'd like to speak with Hana about the data dongle." Joyce didn't flinch. "She's a minor, and you're not getting in without a warrant." As she closed the door, one of the men slid a card between the gap. On the back, handwritten, "Let this go. It's not your fight." Joyce turned the lock, then pulled her niece close. "Pack a bag, baby. We're not sleeping here tonight." They went to Daniel's home in the county outskirts off-grid. No smart meters, no connected locks. Just trees, a fireplace, and a loaded silence. Hana sat at the dining room table with Marco flipping through every drawing, every angle. Then she stopped. "Wait," she said. "That's not the same trash bin." Marco leaned in. "What do you mean?" She pointed to a shape behind the bin in one drawing barely visible. That wasn't there the day I saw it. I think someone changed the scene." Marco froze. "They manipulated the alley. If they planted new bins to erase the symbol, maybe they missed something," Hana said. "Maybe the original's still there. Somewhere." That night, under cover of dark, they drove to the alley. The city lights flickered overhead, cold and distant. They parked 2 blocks away. Marco brought gloves and a camera. Hana brought her flashlight and nerves of steel. They found the new trash bin, smooth, industrial, no markings. But 20 feet deeper into the alley, behind a pile of cardboard, something metallic glinted under the beam of Hana's light. The old bin, rusted, dented, abandoned. And the symbol was still there, partially scratched off, but legible. Marco photographed it, logged GPS, and peeled back a warped panel near its base. Inside, taped behind a slot where the internal liner used to be, was a second data key. This one, smaller, older. He stared. Who the hell was using this as a drop site? Back at Daniel's house, they decrypted the new drive. It held only one folder. For K. Inside were 7 video files. The first was raw surveillance, a hidden camera feed from what looked like a government server room. The second showed a man face hidden, plugging in a drive. The timestamp was 1 day before Victor Hale, the banker in the Reyes case, was attacked. Daniels covered her mouth. This wasn't about Reyes. It was about destroying something, before someone else could see it. The third video was silent. A meeting in a private office. A younger Senator Klein, shaking hands with a man in military uniform. No sound. But the caption burned beneath the screen, Project Drift. Enabling predictive evidence systems. Alpha testing complete. Marco's voice dropped. They weren't just faking tower data. They were trying to build a predictive conviction model. They were testing it. On real people. And Reyes, Daniels whispered, was one of the test cases. Outside, the wind rattled through the trees. Hana stared at the paused video. So the people they arrested were experiments. No one answered, but the final file in the folder was labeled Reyes Full Trail.mp4. A clear feed from inside TowerTech's own AI model simulator, showing how Reyes's data path was generated using templates, not timestamps. Simulated guilt. Real prison. Daniel stood. This isn't just corruption. This is institutional warfare. Marco looked at Hana. You ready to show them what they didn't want anyone to see? She nodded. But we don't go back to court. He raised an eyebrow. Then, where she looked straight at him, eyes clear. We go to the people. We show everyone. All of it. Before they get a chance to bury it again. Because this wasn't just about Reyes. Or tower pings. It was about a system so confident in its control, it never imagined the truth could come from a child with a pencil. But tomorrow, the world would hear her side uncut. And no symbol in any alley could hide what was coming. You said we show everyone, Marco whispered. But how Hana didn't flinch. We livestream it. All of it. Every file, every frame. We don't ask anyone's permission. We just press play. And they did. At 8:00 a.m., sharp the next morning, a quiet link went live. No teaser, no marketing. Just one caption across a black screen. The truth they scripted. The child who unscripted it. And then, the stream began. Daniels had warned them. Once it's out, you can't put it back in the box. Hana had simply nodded. Then, don't build the box in the first place. The first video played the surveillance clip of the planted metadata overrides. Then, the meeting between Senator Klein and the unidentified officer. The audio had been scrubbed, but the body language was damning. Clip after clip revealed how TowerTech had secretly beta tested an evidence forecasting algorithm called Project Drift, pushing the limits of predictive policing by simulating suspects' behaviors using prior arrest patterns and fabricated data trails. The twist wasn't just that it was real. It was that they had tested it on unsuspecting citizens, minorities, low-income communities, people who wouldn't be believed. And Dominic Reyes had been just one name in a long list of silent casualties. By 8:23 a.m., the stream hit 50,000 viewers. At 8:46, national journalists began tweeting the footage. By 9:02, Hana's name was trending globally. And at 9:15, Senator Klein's office released a brief, icy statement. We cannot confirm the authenticity of these materials. But it was too late for denial. Because at 9:18 a.m., Reyes himself appeared live on the stream, flanked by Daniels and Marco. His voice cracked as he read his prepared words. I spent 212 days in a cell, built from numbers that didn't exist. My name became data. My story became irrelevant. Until a little girl remembered something the machines didn't. That should terrify all of us. Then came Hana. She sat cross-legged, knees tucked under her sketchbook on the table. She didn't speak from a script. She spoke from memory. They said I couldn't understand, that I'm too young. But I knew what I saw. I knew where he went. I knew it wasn't fair. She held up a drawing: the alley, the red-hooded man, the symbol on the trash bin. I thought remembering wasn't enough. But maybe it's exactly what they were scared of. She finished with a question. What happens when the system forgets what it means to be human? Do we let it keep deciding who matters? The stream cut to a plain screen. Now you know. Over the next 6 hours, the fallout moved faster than anyone could track. Tech analysts confirmed the logs were real. Independent experts verified the footage as unaltered. Former Tower Tech employees came forward anonymously to corroborate Project Drift's existence. The Department of Justice opened a special inquiry. Congressional leaders called for emergency hearings. Tower Tech's CEO stepped down by sundown. And by nightfall, Senator Klein was subpoenaed. But in the small, dim-lit living room of Daniel's house, the mood was quieter. Hana sat curled on the couch, exhausted. She hadn't said much since the stream ended. She just kept staring at her own hands, as if wondering what exactly she had just undone. Joyce placed a warm blanket over her. "You didn't just remember," she said softly. "You made the world remember." Marco sat beside her. "They'll try to rewrite it again. Spin it. Protect themselves." "I know," Hana murmured. Daniels looked up from her laptop. "You're going to be asked to testify before Congress." Hana blinked. "Will they listen?" There was a pause. Then Daniels said, "They'll have no choice." But even as the wheels of justice turned, something darker loomed. A final string of emails found in the second drive hinted at a hidden backup server offshore, mirrored and still active. The project hadn't been deleted. It had just gone quiet. And someone was keeping it warm. As the room grew still, Marco opened one last folder Hana had circled earlier in the stream, untouched until now. It contained a single line of code and an audio file. He pressed play. A robotic voice spoke, "Welcome to Drift 2.0. Deployment authorized. New control node, H Park." They all froze. Daniel stood. "That's not possible." Marco's eyes darted across the screen. They cloned her behavioral profile. They're trying to use her memory as a dataset. Drift isn't dead. They're evolving it. With her. Outside, the wind picked up again. Somewhere in the dark, the system stirred. And the girl who brought it down had just become its blueprint.